welcome back to Modern Monarchy. Today I just wanted to follow up from last week's episode, which ended after the Queen's coffin was carried in procession to Westminster Hall. And I do have to say that a week on that I am feeling a lot better. I think it was pretty evident in the way I was talking last week that I was grieving, I was sad. I was not having a great time, but I feel a little lighter now, and it's almost like going through all that constant coverage of a nation and a world in mourning and going through all of the ceremony really helped me put a period at the end of the new Elizabethan era. I do want to start this episode off with a little bit of juiciness, a little bit of tea, if you will. I know everyone is tired of talking about whether or not people wore uniforms, whether or not people follow protocol, and whatnot, but I do want to talk about that one moment where Harry and Meghan hold hands while the family is delivering the Queen's coffin to Westminster Hall. I definitely have to preface this with saying I'm not a fan of Meghan. I don't think she's bad. I don't think she's evil. I don't think she has these clever plans. I do believe that the way that the royal family is set up, it's just not for them. And in the moment, during a procession where the family is leaving the Queen's body at Westminster Hall, you can see that the family is moving in a choreographed way. This has most likely been rehearsed, and it's almost like watching some sort of military ceremony. Because when they say they're a working family, you have moments where the family is working and they need to be professional, and when they are interacting as a family, and protocol is a lot looser. And I would say something like this, a funeral, things get very gray, especially when you have one couple in the family that doesn't feel like they belong to begin with. So my feelings on the procession was that this is more of a formal situation. You are doing what everyone else is doing, much like in the military when you have choreographed ceremony. You don't make it about you by doing something differently and drawing attention to yourself. You're coming together as a unified front to pay respects to your queen. So when Harry and Meghan see the four couples in front of them go up to the coffin with the blood royal going first, then the spouse, then a blood royal and the spouse, and a blood royal and the spouse, and a blood royal and the spouse, and then you guys go up together. Okay. And then you immediately, as you're coming around to follow them back towards the door, you hold hands. And when you're holding hands, you break formation. There is a visible difference between you and everyone else. And if you want to have a discussion with me on whether or not this still counts as part of the ceremony, or if they're leaving, that's fine. Ultimately, I know that just because it bothered me in the moment doesn't mean that this was a big deal and I need to talk about it endlessly. But if I was in their shoes and I was following members of the family who are more senior than I am, who don't even have to invite me here, who I've done nothing but hurt for the last 2 years, I would be doing exactly what everyone else is doing, exactly how it's choreographed. I know it ultimately doesn't mean anything if I just, you know, I felt irritated in the moment. I think I also felt more instantly irritated because at the time I'd been watching Megan's face because it was very uncomfortable. She had this frozen kind of smirk on her face, but to me, it looked like a woman who is an American actress from LA who has been trained for the last 20 years at least, that every time there's a camera in your face, you have to perma smile. But she knows that this is not the time to smile. But she's also maybe trying not to overdo the sad face so that nobody will pick on her for looking too dramatically sad. I understand she's in a hard spot. I also understand she put herself there. Like, you could have left the family and not trashed them from across the ocean, but the last 3 weeks before the Queen died, whew, no shots were spared, ma'am. And you have plans to keep going. So I was actually, in that moment, allowing myself to feel a little bad for her. And then as soon as they come around the corner and they're holding hands, I was just like, oh, okay, never mind. Never mind. You don't care. So that's just how I feel on that. That's why that rubbed me the wrong way. I just didn't want to talk about it last week because I was still in the heat of the moment of being like, I'm really irritated about this, but I can't pinpoint why I'm allowing myself to be so angry. So let's move on now that I've discussed that. So, after said procession, there was 4 days of the Queen's coffin lying in state at Westminster Hall for the British public to come through and give their respects, say thank you, bow, curtsy to the coffin. I believe the most I saw for the length of the line was about 5 miles, and they actually had to cut it off at some point so they could keep the wait time under control because I think it got almost to a 30-hour wait, which I don't know. How do you stand for 30 hours? What? I can barely stay awake that long. How do you stand for... maybe there's like some sort of adrenaline of talking to people next to you, but geez Louise. When the queue was closed, there was a queue for the queue. It was a second queue. People were calling the QE2, which I thought was cute. Love it. During the 4 days of lying in state, there were 2 vigils of the princes, which I love so much because there's something about the vigil of the princes that, it allows you to see the family again, which obviously I like, but also it really looks like it kind of bonds the family more, and I appreciate seeing them as a group. We had seen one vigil of the princes up at St. Giles. That first one was really hard to watch because the death was so fresh, and to see her 4 children just about ready to cry, oh, it was rough. Just as rough as watching the second vigil of princes during the 4 days of lying in state at Westminster because it was done by 8 grandchildren, and William and Harry were in military uniform and the rest were not. It was really good to see all the grandchildren together guarding their grandmother as she lay there. Also, William looked good in his military uniform, that's true. But I did like how Harry had his hat, the front of his hat down, so it just covered his eyes, and then his facial hair was trimmed real nice. Looked like a little toy soldier. He looked sharp, man. I also think he probably covered his eyes because he didn't want to look at anybody because he was upset. But that's besides the point. On Monday, the day of the actual funeral, 6:30 in the morning, doors were closed. The last of the public said goodbye to the Queen and left, and then Blackrod was the last one to bow to the coffin and say goodbye. And as she walked off, she wiped a tear from her face, and I almost started crying. Then around 8 o'clock, there were buses of heads of state and royal families from around the world that were dumped at Westminster Abbey. For some reason, Biden got to take Cadillac 1, known as the Beast. Basically, he got to come in by himself. I'm not 100% sure what the justification was for that, but okay. A little before 11, the Queen's coffin was taken in procession from Westminster Hall across the street to Westminster Abbey, where we would have this huge, beautiful state funeral. Westminster Abbey is also where the Queen had her wedding to Prince Philip and where she also had her coronation. It was all beautiful. There was lots of church songs and stuff I don't really know about, so I don't do religion. I also can't hear when people, thousands of people sing a song together. I can't really hear what the words are, so towards the end of the funeral, people did notice that Harry was not singing God Save the King, which we obviously don't know why he didn't sing it. I just thought it was an interesting choice because, if he had a choice, maybe he couldn't get the words out because he was that upset. Maybe. He did look kind of frozen. But he was sitting directly behind the king, so to not sing God Save the King while sitting directly behind him was interesting. Then we go back into procession to carry the Queen on the gun cart once again to Wellington Arch so that we could put the coffin in a hearse and we could drive everybody to St. George's at Windsor for the committal service, which was my favorite of the two, not gonna lie. Once they got to the end of the long walk in front of Windsor, we started procession again. I liked this funeral more than the one at Westminster because this one was a lot more personal. It was more for Elizabeth, the person, than the Queen. Her coffin was greeted at the door by her corgis, Mick and Sandy, and her horse, Emma. And can I tell you, when I saw those corgis, I almost cried because I was like, they don't even know. This is a funeral for their mom. I'm so upset. But anyways, after I got over the fact that I'm sad for the corgis, who now have to go live with Andrew, by the way, so you know what? I'm gonna start a petition. Maybe I can get those corgis. I could give them a better life. I have a field over here. They can run around. They'll love it. So we carry the coffin into St. George's Chapel. We go back into singing hymns and doing churchy things again, which I'm sorry if you're religious and this part was important to you. Again, I think it sounds really pretty, but it doesn't really do anything for me. Anyways, the parts that I did really like and I found really symbolically heavy Before the final hymn was sung, the instruments of state, so the crown, the scepter, and the orb, the golden orb, were removed from the coffin one at a time. And then after the final hymn, the king put the queen's company camp color on the coffin, and the Lord Chamberlain breaks his wand and places it on top of the coffin. And the breaking of the wand is the official ending of her reign, and it now leaves her as an ordinary Christian soul for God to take. Whew. That got me again, just saying that. See, I can tell you I'm not religious, but like, give me some symbolism I can understand, and you got me. When they took away the instruments of state, for me, I almost felt relief for her to have the weight of the monarchy taken off of her shoulders. Like, she could just be that young girl Elizabeth that we saw in films of her running around in fields in Scotland or wherever she'd like to be. And then, while the Dean of Windsor was reading the psalm, the coffin started to lower, and it continued to, while the Garter King of Arms read off all of her titles. As the coffin was lowering, you could see them both pausing what they were reading to look up and actually see that moment where the coffin is starting to be lowered into the floor, which, ooh, buddy. Whoa. Every time they do that part, I'm telling you, like, at this point, because we've been going on this for like 10 days now, I was like, yeah, I know the end is coming and I'm not gonna be that upset. But when they lower her coffin and when Pipe Major James Banks starts playing Sleep, Dearie Sleep as he starts walking down the hall, I can't help it. I cried. Okay? I cried. After the pipes are played, all of the Queen's titles are transferred to Charles, and the Archbishop of Canterbury pronounces the blessing, and everyone sings the National Anthem, which this time they zoom in on Charles's face, and he's exhausted, he is devastated, and I think every time people sing the National Anthem around him, just imagine you've been alive for 73 years, and since you've been able to talk, people have expected you to sing the National Anthem, but this time you don't get to sing anymore, and it's because everybody's singing about you, which is just another reminder of, hi, your mom's dead. I don't think he's gonna enjoy hearing that song for a while. I felt that was a really good service, and I really feel a sense of peace about this now, and it all has a nice sense of finality. The king has said that the royals will be in a state of mourning for another 7 days. We believe that the king and queen have returned to Scotland to grieve in private, and there are no public engagements. Including today, Prince William was supposed to be in New York for the Earthshot Summit, but he can't do that now. But hopefully he'll still be there or in Boston in December, and hopefully I can go because that would be nice, and it's not that far away. Also, they've shown pictures of the stone slab that is going to be placed where Elizabeth is going to rest with her family and her husband. It's going to have George VI, 1895 to 1952, his wife Elizabeth's name underneath, 1900 to 2002. It's followed by a metal garter star, and then Elizabeth II, 1926 to 2022, and then Philip, 1921 to 2021. I'll just read some information I got from the Daily Mail Online. The humble stone annex, which can be viewed through a metal gate inside of St. George's Chapel, also contains the ashes of the late monarch's sister Margaret. The public will be able to view the Queen's final resting place from next week, but will have to pay for the privilege. The chapel, which is currently closed during the period of royal mourning, will reopen to visitors on Thursday, September 29th, as part of a general tour of Windsor Castle, costing up to £28.50 for adults and £15.50 for children. The castle is only open 5 days a week from Thursday through Monday, but St. George's Chapel is closed to the public on Sundays as it is a living place of worship. Castle tours are run by the Royal Collection Trust, a registered charity and a department of the royal household. No profits are kept by the royal family. So I hope that someday, whenever I get to go to England, I'm definitely going to stop by there and pay my respects to the Queen. So to cap this off with all that, I would like to say that the funeral, all 10 days, were everything needed for the death of such a large and ironically physically tiny figure in history. It was absolutely beautiful, and she deserved nothing less. I'm going to leave you with the sound of Pipe Major James Banks playing the final event. But if you'd like to follow me on any other social media platforms, you can find me on Instagram at Modern Monarchy Podcast, at _Modern Monarchy on Twitter, and I'm Modern Monarchy on YouTube. So until next week, bye!